Over to DW's Nick Connolly now, who joins us from Kyiv. Nick, could Ukraine's incursion into the Russian region of Kursk shift the dynamic of the war in a way and lead the way towards peace talks?
I think, and only the most optimistic people here in Kyiv would believe that the sight of Ukrainian troops on Russian soil would immediately change everything for Russian civilians, and get them to put pressure on Putin to end this war. But this is part of a bigger kind of campaign by Ukraine to try and increase the price, the domestic price of this war for Vladimir Putin, for the Russian regime. It's not just about taking territory in Kursk. We've also seen those attacks on Russian oil refineries deep behind the front lines, behind the border with drones. We've seen attacks on other infrastructure, power infrastructure in Russia, coming off the back of Russian attacks on Ukrainian power infrastructure, basically to show the Russian population that this is not just a one-way street, that the violence that Russia is meting out to Ukraine will come back. So that is the kind of bigger picture. There's also a hope that creating this conflict on Russian soil in Kursk region will force the Russian army to move resources away from the front lines in Ukraine. We have seen first evidence of that, albeit not so much from Donbass, where the most intense fighting is, but there are reports of Russian troops being pulled back from Zaporizhia and Kharkiv regions of Ukraine to Kursk to fight the Ukrainian army there. And it's also about prisoners of war. We've had reports from the Ukrainian army of hundreds, if not thousands, of Russians, and largely young conscripts being taken prisoner there that can then be exchanged for Ukrainians who've been in Russian POW captivity in for some parts, of up to 2 years. So there are lots of reasons why they seem to think this is a good idea. And for now, you get the sense from the Ukrainian leadership that they think this is a good investment of their time and their resources.
You mentioned Donbass, Nick. I mean, we're hearing that Russian troops are making significant gains in Ukraine's Donbass region. So why wouldn't Ukraine's army, focus more of its efforts there to stop that from happening?
So the short answer that you hear from Ukrainian soldiers and strategists is basically, we couldn't achieve much of a difference in Donbass with the resources, with the manpower and the equipment that we've sent to Kursk. We can't check this, but they say that they have not lost much in the way of soldiers in terms of wounded and dead in Kursk, and that basically because the border was so lightly defended by the Russian side, they've been able to go deep into Russia with comparatively small numbers of people, whereas in Donbass, where the fighting has been intense basically for 10 years, it is very hard to push the Russians back. They have many better equipped and better experienced units operating there. So that's kind of their first response to all this. And they say, yes, we will go and we will send more people into Donbass. But obviously their hope is that this embarrasses Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership into pulling troops away from the front lines in Ukraine, and that then the task in the east becomes easier. They'll say something to you, they'll say, we've tried that. We tried that last summer during the counter-offensive, and sending more troops into the same positions and hope that the result will be different is just as risky, if not more, than sending people to Kursk.
Nick, as always, thank you so much for that. That's Nick Connolly reporting from Kyiv.